Hey, what's up? This is Jake, and now we're going to be getting into some hands-on stuff with Terraform. We've gone over all the whats and the hows and the whys and all that stuff. So the next step is to go ahead and install Terraform on your machine. So you can just Google that really quick. Once you've got it installed, you can just type Terraform, and you should see a list of available commands, and then you should know that you did it correctly. And I went ahead and created a single server demo directory, and it's empty for us to use to build a little demo. So the other thing I'm going to do is you should have, in order for this to work, we're going to be building resources in the AWS cloud. You should have the AWS CLI configured. So if you run AWS configured and set your credentials, you should have them set in your home.aws/credentials directory. In that file in your .aws directory. And as long as you've got that set up, you should be able to do like an AWS EC2 describe instances. And I've got one instance running right now, which is a WordPress blog. And if I go down to my key, my tags, my key, you can see the value WordPress blog. So I just have this one instance, and that's it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have to create, we're just going to create a basic instance. We're not going to do anything with it, log into it, nothing. Like, it's just going to be an instance, just so you can see how this works. So we're going to be using HashiCorp language for this. So you're finally going to get to see what that looks like. Again, it's declarative, so we're going to be describing the infrastructure that we want, and let Terraform figure out how to what to do with that. We're going to be interacting with AWS as our provider, so you'll get to see kind of how that works. A provider is really just a logical abstraction of an upstream API, and you can write this in any editor. I'm using VS Code, but you can use whatever you want. So first thing we need to do is we need to configure the provider that we want. So in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call it like main.tf. So these should all be TF files. If you're using VS Code, you should get prompted at this point to install plugin for Terraform, and you should definitely do that because it helps with formatting and looks for errors and stuff like that. So in order to get started, we need a provider. So who's our provider? Our provider is AWS. Okay. And then you just need to provide a value as to what exactly you want Terraform to do with that provider. So in our case, all we want to do is we just want to set our region equal to US East 1. That's it. So that's our provider. I'll go ahead and save this. And you can move on to the next step. So the next step is to define what resources you want. So we're going to define, well, a resource. And really it's like resource, and then it would be like the provider underscore the type of resource that you want, and then you could name the resource, and then you'd put in the configuration of, declare whatever it is that you would want that thing to be built. So for us, the resource is just going to be AWS as the provider, and then this resource type is going to be an instance. And then I'm just going to name this like my instance. Okay. And then for the values, we're going to provide an AMI. And this is where we're going to see some formatting stuff. It's kind of cool. And then we need an AMI, right? Because we don't know what our AMI is in this region. And they change when they get updated. So I wouldn't hard code this, but we're going to try it. And then the other thing you're going to need is the instance type. And we're going to use T2 micro. Okay, so now we need an AMI. So what you have to do is you have to go to the AWS AMI Marketplace. You have to go to the AWS Marketplace and actually find an AMI. Okay, so you could do that, and you could search for it and then find the AMI that you want, and then copy the AMI ID and then stick it in here. and that could work. So we could try that, right? One option, maybe we could do operating systems, Amazon machine image. Here's our Amazon Linux 2 HVM. So this is like the standard AMI, right? So here it is. And if you read through this, you should be able to get. I do not look AMIs up like this, by the way, versus just like, if you read through documentation, this is what people are going to tell you. Deliveries, Amazon machine image. What exactly the ID is. Again, I have no idea what this ID is. I'm looking for it, but so another thing people do is you can log into the console, and with that AWS console, you can just start creating an instance, and then when you get to the AMI section, it should give you the number. You can go ahead and copy and paste that. So I don't even see it on here, but the better way to do it is to maybe pass some kind of variable, right? So in order to do that, um, you would need to like be able to query AWS and be like, hey, what's the ID of the, you know, Amazon Linux 2 AMI? So that's what we're going to do. So the first thing I'm going to do before um, the resources is you're going to add something called data. Okay, and data is just a way to retrieve information from a provider so that you can use it in your templates. You can use it all over the place, and it's pretty convenient. So we're going to do AWS again, the provider, and then the resource type would be AMI, and then I'm just going to name it like standard AMI, and then we need to give it some parameters. So I want to do most recent equals true. That's one of the reasons we're even doing this. And then I want the owner to be, and this is supposed to be in a list, Amazon. Okay. Actually, it's owners. Owners is Amazon. And then I'm going to, yeah. All right, then we're going to add a filter. Because there may be, other options. And we're going to do name equals root device type, and values equals EBS. And then let's see, let's do a second filter. And that filter is going to be name equals virtualization type. And then the values will be HVM. Oops, HVM. That looks about correct. Filter. My other filter. I didn't close this. All right, so just so you can see what this looks like, let me pull this down. All right, so we have a provider, and then I'm saying, hey, go get this AMI. I'm going to name it standard AMI. Make sure it's the most recent one owned by Amazon, and it has to be a root device type EBS and virtualization type HVM, and then that should be it. So is this got too many? Open, close, open, open, close, open, close, close. Okay, cool. All right, so that would be what this should look like. And then for AMI, I can just put data, right? Dot AWS underscore AMI dot standard underscore AMI dot, and then we need the ID, right? So just ID. So now instead of going and looking all this up, you can just um, reference the data, and then the data, when Terraform reads this, the binary of Terraform knows data is supposed to go get this information here from this provider, and it will use these filters, get the most recent one, and then that will give us a single AMI ID. And then we can pass that AMI ID here as a variable. And this is a parameter that's required. And then instance type, this is your bare minimum. So that should get you an instance. And if you're wondering how on earth I know what to put in all of these, like what format to put all these in, you probably saw I have this document open. And what you want is you just want to get to the Terraform Registry. So the registry has a list of providers and modules you can use. And since we're using AWS as a provider, I just click on AWS, and then this is the overview. Go to documentation, and then this is every resource you could ever want. So for us, we're using EC2. So if I go to EC2, I can see a list of resources and a list of data sources. So I knew the data source information because I went to data sources, clicked on AWS AMI, and I got the example usage, and then they give you the reference for all the arguments and the attributes. And then the same is true for resources, where if I'm using AWS AMI as a resource, like I'm going to make one, then you could do that. But what we're doing is we're using an instance. We're using AWS instance, and it'll give you some basic. Again, here's like another filter that somebody did for Ubuntu on AMI lookup, network stuff, but there's an argument reference as well as the attribute information. So this is where you get the information if you're not quite sure what arguments to pass or what's optional, or what's required, what can you pass, what format does it mean, all that other stuff. So anyways, that's where that comes from. So this looks pretty good. So this should work. So if this is the first time you're using Terraform, you have to do something called Terraform init in whatever directory that you're in. Keep in mind, you really need to operate in a directory world. So have a directory just for this little project that you're doing. And if you're doing other projects, the easiest thing to do, just create another directory. So Terraform successfully initialized, and you can now begin working with Terraform. So we're going to do a Terraform plan. And what this is going to do is it's going to look at our any TF file that's in here, and it's going to compare what we want to what's in our AWS account. And if there's something different, it's going to say, hey, I plan to build this. And if there's nothing different, it'll say, man, there's no changes to make. So let's see what happens. I run Terraform plan. Oh, wait, and we got here in provider AWS region equals US East 1. Oh, it's probably because I need quotes. Let's try this again. Oh, great. Now I did it again. And then this one also needs quotes. Okay, so the more you declare in your file, the longer this can take. So sometimes it takes a little bit, but you just got to be patient. All right, so here's what the output looks like. So it says resource actions are indicated with the following symbols. Any of the plus, the green plus is create, and any of the red minus is going to be destroy. So we're not destroying anything in this case, but here you can check it out. An AWS dot my instance, that's what we want to call it, will be created, and this resource here's like all the information. So it did find the AMI, get password data false, instance type T2 micro, source destination type true. Everything else is known after apply. So it doesn't have all the information because I didn't tell it what to build. Now, we know with T2 micro, like what a lot of these resources are going to be. But again, it doesn't know because I didn't tell it, right? This is the declarative nature of Terraform. And then here's our capacity reservation, which I didn't do, EBS block device, and then all the other information. So really, way to look at this is these are all the possibilities that you could stick in your TF file in order to build this. So at the bottom there's a summary, plan 1 to add, 0 to change, 0 to destroy. Okay, and also there's a note at the bottom. It's kind of cool. If you didn't specify out parameter, then there it says that Terraform can't guarantee that exactly these actions will be performed in Terraform apply and subsequent run. So you might want to look into doing that, but it's for the purpose of what we're doing, we're not going to do that. So instead of Terraform plan now, we're going to go ahead and do Terraform apply because we reviewed all of our changes and we say, yeah, that looks good. And we're just running this and it's going to go through, it'll give you little updates to tell you like, hey, 10 seconds has gone on. We know that you're waiting and we're still working on it. So we'll see how long this takes. All right. And then there's a little warning at the bottom, right? Do you want to do this? And it gives you, again, a review of your Terraform plan. These are really good too. You can copy and paste this kind of stuff into like tickets or whatever, or you could pipe it into a ticket or whatever you want to do. All right, so I said yes. It's now creating, and this is where you'll get your little updates. And it'll probably take like, it says 30 seconds, but it's not really 30 seconds, 30, 40 seconds, and then it'll be done. So then we're going to use the AWS CLI command to, just like I did the check for my WordPress blog, and check and see if I have 2 instances. We didn't really name it, so it won't have a name. All we did was we named it in the Terraform file, right? Apply complete. So we named it here, but this is just the name of the resource like inside of this file, right? So if you go to the console, the AWS management console, and you went to EC2 and you clicked on instances, you would see a blank name on this instance because technically the name comes from a tag. So let's check it out. So I'm going to do AWS EC2 describe instances. And here we can see my WordPress. That's the key name, but here I'll show you. So tags, name, WordPress blog. But now I have a second instance. So here's my instance ID for my second instance. And it in fact, yeah, here it is. It in fact does not have a name. So we'll have to change that. So how do you do that? Well, like I said, you have to add a tag. So under this resource, before I close this, what I would do is I would just say tags equal, and then I'll leave it open so that I can add multiple, but I'm just going to add one, name equals my instance, I guess. Okay, and that's it. So I just changed something, right? It was really small, it's just a tag. So what do you think happened if I run a Terraform plan again? Well, I'll show you. Specifying a resource name. What did I miss? Oh, man, it is like missing quote day, I guess. There. That should work. So now we're getting into like looking at diffs or like drift. So then if somebody were to make a change in the console or through another tool, you could see um, how it differs. So in this case, we can see, hey, this instance is going to get updated because it needs a tag, right? So it's going to do one change. So if you're like, yeah, we want to tag that, then I can just do the Terraform reply. Again, it'll ask you, it'll basically give you the same information as the plan, and then say, do you want to make this change? Type yes, and then it'll make the change. So that's pretty much the long and short of it. But we're gonna do one more thing after this, so I can show you kind of a neat little thing if you're OCD like me about how you like to organize all of your files, which is kind of cool. So, all right, so this looks good. Now, if I do the AWS EC2 describe bleh, instances, let's see, here's my WordPress key, and I come down here to the bottom, and I can go key, my instance. Cool. So now we have a name, and it looks friendly to other people. But this, the more you add, like the longer this gets, right? So what if you didn't want to have everything in one file? How do you do that in Terraform? It's really easy. So let's say I want to take this data part out. So I'm just going to cut this, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call it data.tf, and I'm just going to paste it right in there. I'm not going to change anything. And then I'm going to come back to main, and let's say, well, I don't want the provider thing in there. I just want my resources. That's fine. New file. Actually, let me do it here. New file, providers.tf. Boop. And just stick that in there. And then now I'll go back to my main file, and it's like, okay, that's better. This is literally just the resources I want to build. And you can comment stuff in here too. Not really necessary for what we're doing right now, but this, especially right here, somebody might look at it like, what the hell is this? And you can just be like, get the, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but just in case, like, get the most recent AMI ID for the Amazon Linux to AMI, right? Um, and then this is just like build an instance. So this is nice. It's neat. Everything is organized. If you had any network information you needed to update or whatever, you could have network files, which is pretty handy. Like I said, it just reads whatever's in the directory. So um, the downside to doing it this way is once you start getting organized, quote unquote, sometimes it's more confusing to have like 30 Terraform files than it is to have maybe like 5. So there's a balance, right? There's such thing as having too many files, and there's such thing as having way too much text on a page. I try to go with like as long as I can scroll up and down within like a few seconds. That's long enough for me. So yeah, so we broke that up. The next thing I would probably recommend to do is as you're getting used to this is to also do everything with Git. So you should be pushing this stuff up to your GitHub page. So when you do that with Terraform, I'm specifically mentioning this because there's a little thing I would recommend. And so what I would do is in your directory, add a new file and just call it .git ignore. Okay, and in here you're going to want to add a list of file extensions or files, whatever, that you don't want to push to Git. And the ones you want are .terraform and star.tfstate and star.tfstate.backup. I won't get into the super intricacies of this, but basically, the known state of your infrastructure is written to a state file, a Terraform state file. And if you're working with other people and you are pushing your state file up to Git, it can make things really, really, really weird and difficult and sometimes impossible to deploy or provision because then you're messing around with, well, who has the most up-to-date state file? And that can get kind of tricky. And if you push a shitty state file, then you're really in trouble because your stuff's going to break all over the place. So there's a way to, what I would recommend to do is, at least on AWS, is to do your state file back to an S3 bucket so that when everybody works with this repository, the state file actually lives in an S3 bucket behind your Git repo, which is pretty nice. It makes it pretty manageable. So yeah, so once you have this git ignore file, you can just do, I'll just show you like a quick thing. You could do like git add dot git ignore. Okay, and then git commit dash m added a git ignore file. Okay, and then I already have my repo set up, so I'm just going to push. I only use one branch for this tiny little demo. So yeah, so you'll see like, oh, it turned gray, so it's starting to go away, right? So you don't want to get something working and have anything be green over here. You need to get all this stuff pushed up. So it's like, well, why don't you just push everything? Version control. Sometimes I like to just push individual things. So I pushed the git ignore file separately because it really doesn't have anything to do with Terraform. It does, but it's my Git configuration of Terraform, of how I'm going to manage Terraform, not really my Terraform files. And you'll also notice a Terraform lock, right? So this lock file, all that stuff will sort itself out after we get done here. So if I do a git add, I'll just do dot now, just add all of it. And it says warning, replaced by in a server demo. Blah, blah, blah. This file will have its original line endings in your working directory. I don't really worry about the Terraform lock file. So the last thing we did was, yeah, so if I do a Terraform, we did the apply, right? I have to double check. Well, there's only one way to find out. Do a Terraform plan. Just see if there's anything different. If there's nothing different, it'll come back and tell you that there's no difference. And that's what's kind of nice, because if you're spastic like me and your brain is all over the place, then you can check Terraform plan all day long. It's not going to hurt anything. All right, refreshing state. No changes. Yeah, so we're good. So I'm just going to do a git commit and added TF files for single instance on AWS, and then git push. Cool. So now everything is saved, everything is great, and if I need it later, I've got it. So what does that look like in the console? It looks exactly like you would expect it to look like. And at this point, what I'd like to do is get you away from using the console. Now that we're in the command line and we're typing Terraform commands, you should start gradually using less and less of the console, um, and get more and more hands on the keyboard with this stuff, because um, you're going to learn a lot more if you don't use the console. You'll still know where things are in the console, but the console changes so much that being an expert on user interfaces is a totally different thing than knowing how to code it. And since coding it is what really starts building out your automation, it starts, like you're able to combine a lot of things in code that you can't do in the console. Like I can update Git, and I can update Terraform, and I can update how my AWS resources are from this console, or from this terminal. If I was in the console, I could only update my AWS resources, and if I update them there, they're not versioned in Git. So you're really doing yourself a disservice if you just stick to the console. So while everybody teaches AWS with the console, I'm only going to teach it from this point forward. I do a lot of videos for beginners on how to do that stuff, but from this point forward, as far as my Terraform series goes, we will only be using Terraform from the command line. I mean, kind of have to, but like we're not going to be using the AWS console for anything. So yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. But as far as building out a single server goes, there's a lot of very simple examples out there, but this is a little bit more in depth. But I wanted to go over like these get ignore files and that you can separate your files out into different um, kind of logical entities, and that you can use, a lot of people don't really use the data thing um, in basic demos, but who the heck wants to go look up an AMI and hard code all that stuff all the time? I'll never need to change this again. If it changes, then it changes. Speaking of which, what do you think would happen if tomorrow AWS updated the Amazon Linux 2 image and so then the AMI ID changed? And if you're thinking that Terraform plan would show the ID is different and so it needs to build a new instance, you're absolutely correct. And that's exactly what it would do, which is kind of nice because if you had a little Terraform plan that ran, every so often, every few hours or every day or however often you want to check for drift, um, you could absolutely make sure everything is on the most latest thing the second that it comes out. And so that's kind of nice. You don't have to worry about that. There's some testing and things that we'll get into that you'll want to do, which you can absolutely also do with Terraform, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. So I'm probably just gonna move on through a little bit more complicated stuff. But as far as building stuff out, you've got access to the Terraform AWS provider documentation in the Terraform Registry, and you've seen the basic structure of how all this works and what kind of the options are. So from this point forward, you could really just take this and do anything and go anywhere. So good luck, and yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next one.